being annoyed with Enzo Maresca for losing to Unai Emery is the equivalent of being annoyed with Jake Paul for losing to Anthony Joshua. One is an elite level performer. The other one is a pretender. You cannot be annoyed with Enzo Maresca for being totally outthought, totally outskilled by Unai Emery. Unai Emery is a serious manager. Enzo Maresca is a charlatan. Enzo Maresca so clearly out of his depth. He came up yesterday against the better man and he was destroyed. But of course he was destroyed in the way that Jake Paul was obviously destroyed, because ultimately it was a mismatch. One, a proven elite level performer, meticulous in the detail and has the trophies to back it up. The other one, completely out of his depth, pretending to be a serious professional. So you can't be too animated about this. You can't be too irate with Enzo Maresca. You can't even be annoyed with the players, because ultimately we are now set up to be a team that aren't really able to compete at the top table. We aren't really set up to be a team ready to compete with the very best. Like, Enzo Maresca is so clearly out of his depth at Chelsea. Like, this has been apparent for so long. Anyone with a brain can see that Enzo Maresca got lucky last year. People want to talk about finishing in the top four. Yeah, fair play. Finishing in the top four. Excellent work. Why? Was it because of Chelsea's brilliance? Did we go away to St James's Park at the end of last season when we desperately needed to win and pull out a massive result to secure top four qualification? Or did we get beat? And the only reason that we actually made it is because Nottingham Forest pressed the self-destruct button. People want to talk about the silverware. Let's be totally honest. I'm going to be totally frank with you here. We won that trophy in Poland. Yeah, fair play. Good luck, right? Well done. On the way to winning that trophy, we went to Dublin, and I'm going to be totally honest with you. We played a team I've never heard of. I've been a football fan all my life. I work in football. I'm very lucky. And I have seen football played on 4 or 5 different continents. I didn't know who Noah were. So can we stop pretending that Chelsea winning that trophy in Poland is somehow a legitimizer for Enzo Maresca? And yeah, look, the Club World Cup was great, but realistically, that cannot define a manager. Like, I don't rate Enzo Maresca. I don't particularly like him, but this is the worst thing that I can possibly say now. I don't particularly care whether he gets sacked. He leaves me feeling a bit cold, but I'm not irate about it. And that is damaging. Anyone who's ever watched me talk about football before, anyone who's ever seen me talk about Chelsea managers before, will know that it's a topic that I get incredibly animated about, incredibly impassioned about. I idolise our greats. I loved Antonio Conte, and I still do. I loved Jose Mourinho, and I still do. I love Carlo Ancelotti. And I literally cannot bear the likes of Maurizio Sarri and Rafael Benitez. Now, whether you agree with that or not isn't the point. The point that I'm trying to demonstrate here is that what has happened at Chelsea in the way that this new ownership have come in and totally normalised mediocrity is, I feel no level of passion about Enzo Maresca, primarily because I am wise enough to deduce that he isn't really the problem. He's not good enough to be a Chelsea manager. He isn't fit to lace the boots of the icons that I just mentioned. Of course he isn't. And even the managers that I didn't like, obviously Rafael Benitez, a manager of Chelsea who I despised. Obviously he's a better manager than Enzo Maresca. But Enzo Maresca isn't the problem at Chelsea. Of course he isn't. I think he should be sacked. I don't think he should have ever got the job, if we're totally honest. Plucking a manager off the bench of a championship side to give them their first opportunity in the Premier League is absolutely nuts. But that's why he got beat by Unai Emery. Like, there's no surprise here that he got beat by Unai Emery. You know, the way that Unai Emery managed that game is something that Enzo Maresca just can't do. He literally cannot do it. Any big moment that Chelsea have had, you think about, let's talk about beating Real Betis in that final in Poland, right? Cole Palmer himself told us that he effectively ignored the manager's instructions in order to win the game for Chelsea. He has been a manager that has been incredibly lucky because we have this generational talent like Cole Palmer at the club. And we only have him at the club through sheer luck. Like, when people want to defend these sporting directors who are destroying the club from the inside out, these owners who are destroying the club from the inside out. When people want to talk about, well, they did bring Cole Palmer to the club, by sheer luck. If Lucas Paqueta's move to Manchester City hadn't collapsed, Cole Palmer was going in the other direction. Lucas Paqueta was going to Man City, right? Everybody remembers Paqueta was going to Man City. That fell for various reasons, and we all know the reasons. That meant that Cole Palmer didn't go to West Ham United. But that's why he ended up at Chelsea. Chelsea didn't do something amazing to somehow deduce that he was this player that desperately needed to come to Stamford Bridge to fulfil his potential. It was sheer luck. It was sheer luck. And let's also be totally frank. For every Cole Palmer, how many Renato Vegas are there? You know, for every Esteval, how many Benoit Badiashiles are there? So I just don't get it. I really don't. And the way that Unai Emery managed that game, the timing of that triple substitution that totally rocked our equilibrium, totally destroyed any sort of flow that we had, and was the reason that the game was won. Like, I don't think anybody, in fact, maybe you can help me here, I don't think that anybody will be able to think of an example where a match this season in the Premier League was so clearly won by the manager. Now, I'm not saying that Unai Emery is the best manager in the league. I'm saying he's up there. But I can't think of an example where the manager is so clearly responsible for the 3 points accrued by the team. You know, like, Pep Guardiola's an amazing manager. Of course he is, a true icon of the game. But the reason that Manchester City beat Nottingham Forest yesterday was basically Ryan Shirky's brilliance. Ryan Shirky's dazzling array of talent is what happened. Now, don't get me wrong, Guardiola deserves credit. But Shirky did the business. Yesterday at Stamford Bridge, it was so obviously Emery inputting his vision of football into that team, deploying the right players, the right personnel tweaks, the right tactical tweaks at the precise time to totally change the game. Like that triple substitutions. I mean, Watkins comes on, obviously. He will get the plaudits. But Onana, you know, we were bossing the midfield. We were so dominant in the midfield, and suddenly Onana comes on. And Jadon Sancho tucking in. You know, he was integral to them. And, you know, suddenly, bang. Suddenly we're winning, suddenly we're losing. You know, you really will struggle to find an example of a match being so clearly won by the manager. It was just such a dramatic shift. Pre and post Emery's intervention. Look at what happened pre-Emery's intervention. Look at what happened post it. And it's almost as if Emery allowed the first half dominance of Chelsea. You know, people go, oh, you were so good in the first half. Yeah. Firstly, we didn't take our chances. But secondly, how much of that was Unai Emery letting us make our moves, letting us declare our hand so that he could then strike like a viper in the second half? Because that is exactly what happened. And, you know, Villa were totally overpowered in that midfield. And then Onana comes on, protecting that back line, and we basically had no answers. You know, Enzo Maresca sitting up there, like trying to come up with an answer. He was baffled, perplexed, didn't have a clue. You know, he was sitting there, totally out of answers, in the way that I was sitting there watching the telly going, we have no answers here. I don't know what to do. But Maresca was the same. Yeah, it was completely average. And that is what happens when you have an average Championship manager at the helm. Can I ask you a favour just to interrupt this video? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you think that Enzo Maresca should be sacked? Will you let me know in the comments below? And while I've got your attention, if you would be kind enough to click subscribe as well. Thank you so much. It really does help me out, and I would love to welcome you into this community. But look, I just think that at Chelsea what we have is we have a B-Tech version of Pep Guardiola, who only got the Chelsea job because of his pre-existing relationship with Pep Guardiola. He had done nothing in management to demand that job. He had done nothing in management to deserve that job. Chelsea, one of the most prestigious jobs in European football. I don't think that's controversial, is it? You think about the managers that I've been mentioning. You think about the footsteps that you're following in. Chelsea is undoubtedly one of the most prestigious jobs in world football. How does Enzo Maresca get that? Through nothing more than a pre-existing friendship with Pep Guardiola. And it's so basic. You know, it's so basic, and that's why we are where we are. You know, the fact that Maresca got done by Emery, of course he did. And it's absolutely ridiculous to even blame him for it. But on some level, I want to insulate him from the criticism. On some level, I don't believe that he deserves the full criticism here. I think that we have to talk about the owners and the sporting directors. You think about what Bowley and Egbali have done to this club, it's a travesty. And you think about what Stewart and Winstanley have done to this first team, it is a travesty. And I think that all should go. The owners won't, but these sporting directors should hang their heads in shame. And I'm so bored about what they have done to this football club, this once great football club. They're destroying it from the inside out. And it's small things. It's goal music after we score a goal. Like when Chelsea score a goal, there is an organic expression of unbridled joy. You do not need the Fratellis to emphasise that. If anything, it dissipates it. CFC LDN doesn't belong anywhere at Stamford Bridge. Our name is Chelsea Football Club. Forget all this rebranding nonsense that is going on. Forget these disgusting ticket prices that these owners are so linked to. And I just think that it's a real shame. And when you think about how Villa played, look, they got a better manager, but they've also actually got a better team. You know, look, some of our players are mesmerisingly good, of course they are. But some are so average. So average. Like the second that you see Benoit Badiashile in the side, you know you're in trouble. You just know that you're in trouble. And I am so bored of these owners via the media as well. I don't know if they brief me. I don't understand it. But they sort of gaslight fans. They gaslight us into believing that we're moving in the right direction. They gaslight us into believing that we're a serious football club. They gaslight us into believing that some of these players are genuinely, potentially world class. And basically none of it is true. Like, do you know where it really came to a head? Like, Jamie Gittins. Like, Jamie Gittins is so obviously not good enough to play for Chelsea. Noni Madueke was. Now, Noni Madueke was sold, and you can debate whether that's right or wrong. But what you cannot do, if you genuinely want to build a good first team, is sell Madueke, who was in the England side, and replace him with Jamie Gittins, who was not in a dreadful Dortmund team. That's not progress. That is money-making, but it is simply not progress. And I hate the way that we're told that Gittins is as good as Madueke. Do you remember where else they did it? Do you remember when they were desperately trying to sell Conor Gallagher? Desperately trying to force Conor Gallagher out of the club. And they were telling us. And the most frustrating thing was journalists, reputable journalists, were peddling this nonsense. They were telling us that Dewsbury Hall was an adequate replacement, if not a better replacement, if not an upgrade on Conor Gallagher. Now, I felt sorry for Dewsbury Hall at Chelsea. He didn't do badly, really, but he's just obviously not good enough to play for Chelsea. But to try and pretend that he was a better option in our midfield than Conor Gallagher was such nonsense. And people lap it up. You're like, there isn't a manager in the world that would pick Kiernan Dewsbury Hall over Conor Gallagher. Conor Gallagher was playing for an England team that was competing seriously at an international tournament. Kiernan Dewsbury Hall was in the Championship. They did it with Chalobah. Remember when they were trying to force Trevor Chalobah out of the club? Embarrassingly, trying to force him out of the club. They were telling us that Tosin Adarabioyo was better than him. And you're like, on what planet? Like, don't lie to me. Don't pretend that Tosin Adarabioyo is a better player than Trevor Chalobah. Because, to be totally honest, they don't play the same sport. Trevor Chalobah is an excellent Chelsea player. Tosin Adarabioyo is at best a championship footballer. And then you've got these owners telling us that, oh no, we're moving in the right direction. Like Jamie Gittins doesn't get in the QPR team. I'm not joking. Jamie Gittins doesn't get in the QPR team. If you want to sell Madueke, fine, right? I think it's a wrong move, but I could kind of rationalise it if you go and get Eze. If you want to sell Madueke, fine, but then you go and buy Eze. You know, if you want Chelsea to be a serious team, I think Robert Sanchez has been one of our better players this season. I thought he was man of the match yesterday. But if you want to be a serious club, you go and you sign Donnarumma. You go and you sign Mark Gahey. You don't go and sign Buonanotte. You don't go and sign Jamie Gittins. You don't go and sign Garnacho. Because if you do, you end up in a situation where you're getting beat at home by Aston Villa. Because that's who we are now. We are a team whose biggest ambition is to somehow try and qualify for the Champions League. That's who we are. We aren't trying to win Champions League. We aren't trying to win league titles. At best, under this ownership, we're a team that wants to qualify for the Champions League. And why? Because that is how you turn a profit. And that is what the venture capitalist Americans who own Chelsea Football Club are all about. You know, and that's why we have a BTEC manager. You know, if you think about how Emery controlled that game, just listen to what Ollie Watkins said about Emery's impact on that game. You know, Ollie Watkins called him a tactical genius. And he's not wrong. But these are the situations that we are currently in. It's a heartbreaker. It really is a heartbreaker. Just feel so flat about it all. These owners have been the worst thing to have ever happened to Chelsea Football Club. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, would love to hear what you have to say. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like. And like I say, I would love for you to click subscribe. I'm going to be going live quite a lot. So yeah, if you could click subscribe, put the bell on, you could be in the next live chat. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. I hope you're having a festive period of joy. In a bit.